Right, for the first time I'm looking at all the hall. Thank you so much for coming, all of you. I know you're here for many different reasons. Most of you are here because of Harpal's outstanding political life. And you are a testament to the depth and breadth of his political life. When I met Harpal, he was thin, clean-shaven, very handsome. Everyone had heard about, I heard about him before I saw him, because he was so handsome, and in the library. But he was quite different. The effect of racism on him that he met in this country was very profound. When I first met him, his view was, you give everyone the benefit of the doubt. You don't think badly of others unless they treat you badly. But the treatment he received, and I'll give you an example, made him a good deal more, I won't say cynical, but more cautious, and gave him a carapace of an armour, self-defence, but that experience also helped him with Ranjeet. When Ranjeet met racism at school, his father was able to help him meet that experience and come through it and grow by it rather than be flattened by it. At the time I met Harpal, it was about 1964. With great rebellion in my heart, I had voted Labour for the first time when I was first allowed to vote. I voted for Wilson. My love affair with Labour lasted very few months, I think, because the UDI happened. Universal Declaration of Independence by Ian Smith and his white racists in Rhodesia, and the complete lack of reaction by Wilson's government really opened my eyes as to what the nature of the Labour Party was. I wouldn't have been able to, at that stage, to say they were an imperialist party. I didn't have the understanding. But I knew that this was not what I expected of a so-called socialist government. And really, I knew very little of socialism. I wasn't brought up in a family that was even working class. It was petit bourgeois and very conservative with a small c. And I knew when I contacted Harpal, when I first met Harpal, that he was an extraordinary person. He was unique. I knew I wanted to be with him. I also knew, and quite deliberately knew, that it would not be a conventional life. It would not necessarily be an easy life. There'd be easier options. But he was such an outstanding person, such an outstanding mind, such an outstanding companion. I thought there can be no substitute for someone of this quality. I wouldn't find someone like that elsewhere. So I was determined. But I did meet opposition from my family, my immediate family. My sister, to whom I was closest, said, Maysel, you can't marry Harpal. Think about the children. So I said, yes. Well, I thought about the children. I thought our children would be wonderful. I thought the mixture of Harpal's genes and mine could be potentially wonderful. And I think I was right. But it was to Harpal that I owed my education in Marxism. I knew nothing about Marxism in my background, not unlike most English people at the time. But the thing about Marxism, as I've said to others after me, as in fact I've discussed with my children, once you understand what Marxism-Leninism particularly has to offer, dialectical, historical materialism, it gives you the key to understanding the world, both the natural world and the world of human society. The key to understanding. And unless you are going to be really an explicit, even if you don't dare say it, renegade, once you have understood that, you can't unlearn it. That is with you. It's here. It forms your character. It forms how you look at the world, everything you do, everything you say thereafter. It's fundamental and it changes everything. Changes your outlook. And when Harpal and I first got together, neither of us had any experience in the working class movement, although I understand now he did take part in some demos in Delhi when he was a law student there. And for Harpal in India, law was a postgraduate. Although it was a primary degree, it was a postgraduate, like in the States. So he took his BA in Punjab, his LLB in Delhi. He came to London to study as a postgraduate, doing a master's in law at UCL, around the corner, just at the same time as I was doing my undergraduate degree. So we met. We met the year, basically, I decided to give up Dramsoc and start studying. So I was in the library, he was in the library, and we met. We became friends. But it was only after we married, and we'd both left college by then, both graduated, we had decided quite early on that we would be involved in the working class movement, and that would be our priority, so that we would not be looking to have careers. Obviously, we had to have jobs, we had to work. Although our families were not poor, we were not born of the riches that, we didn't have to work. And we wanted to work. We wanted to be part of the working class. We wanted to work and earn our own living and be independent. So he didn't accept money from his father, and I wasn't in a position. My father had supported me through college, but now I had to go and work. And I wanted to work. I didn't want to be dependent. I remember when I was looking for articles whilst I was at college, I wanted to be a solicitor. In 1965, I was met with the response that, well, while you're articled, you can't expect to be paid. And you should be lucky that you're not paying us for articles. And I said, sorry, I'm not going to work here if you're not going to pay me. I'm not. Well, won't your father support you? Well, he might be, but I don't want to ask him any longer. He's supported me through 3 years university. No fees, they were all paid, but my family didn't qualify for me to have a maintenance grant. So I had to be dependent on my father agreeing that I could live away from home and could go to university for 3 years and get the qualification and study, which I really wanted to do. And I was very grateful to him for doing that, but I wasn't going to prolong it. I wasn't going to go back for another 2 years, 2.5, 3 years, and say, you've got to support me while I do my articles. No way. I want to get married and have my own life and be responsible for my own life. And so in the end, Harpal and I decided I would teach, the one thing I thought I would never ever do. And I'm not suited for it. And it only lasted for 3 years, because then we finally decided that, thank you, we finally decided we would not be going to India. Our original plan was to go to India, but by the time 2-3 years had passed, we were so deeply involved with the movement here, it did not seem necessary or even desirable to go to India. Besides which, his father, a very strong personality, just where Harpal got it from, was insistent that Harpal join the family business. And in fact, when we got married, we were going to get married in September, and Harpal was going back for his first visit to India since coming to England to study, that summer holidays. And he said to me, we've got to get married in April before I go. So we did. And Jill's mother thought I must be pregnant. It was his marriage at short notice. Why bring it forward for 6 months? The reason was, if he'd gone to India, he would have been married by the time he came back. His father had the daughter of a wealthy house all lined up for him. But by being married already, he would go and say, that horse is bolted. No chance. Sorry about that. So he came back. And it's all to our benefit that he did. So my little share, my contribution, he came back. But we had got involved very early on with Manchanda. Abhimanyu Manchanda had been the secretary and co-editor of the West Indian Gazette with Claudia Jones. And in that way, we reached, and we were in a sense straight away in the mainstream of the life of communism, British anti-revisionist communists in Britain. And there were two organisations that Manchanda set up at that stage. One was the Britain-Vietnam Solidarity Front, because the late 60s were the height of the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations in this country, in the States and Europe. You may have read about the riots, the student riots in '68 in the States, in France. It was also a big year for demonstrations here. And the other organisation, which it was the Revolutionary Marxist-Leninist League that we joined with Manchanda, was the Friends of China organisation. It was the height of the Cultural Revolution. And we had very close ties, or Manchanda had very close ties with the Chinese embassy at that time, and we were great supporters of the Cultural Revolution. So it was a time of great ferment, very interesting time, and we learned a lot. But Harpal, as you know, is never backward in coming forward. He had his views, and he was studying all the time. What hasn't been mentioned today is that his course started in October, he came in July of '62, because he wanted to come before the first, I think it was the British Nationality Act or the Immigration Act came into force, which for the first time required citizens of the British Empire, stroke Commonwealth, to get visas. He wanted to come to England before all of that started. So he came in July, he had to kick his heels for a couple of months before he would start his university course in October. He found a place to live with some family of friends of friends of friends in Luton, not exactly the hive of culture or activity, but he made his way to Luton Library because he had lots of time to kill. And at that stage, unbelievably, the public library stocked Lenin. He found a book by Lenin in Luton Library, started reading Lenin, and that was the beginning of his life as a Marxist-Leninist, because he found that Lenin spoke to him. I think what you've heard from Ranjeet about his early life, he understood imperialism. And here he was reading Lenin, who explained imperialism, what it really was, what it meant, what the driving force was. And he recognized it and he immediately knew it. And that started him on a life of studying. And Harpal loved studying. And he embraced that wholeheartedly. And I have to say that if I had not met Harpal, I'm quite sure I would not have become a Marxist-Leninist, because there weren't many others around. And I doubt if I'd have come across it myself. And I think that applies really for all the comrades who eventually formed the organisation, which he then formed after he was booted out of the RMLL. We had a couple of quiet years, and then the women's movement came along. I joined it, and Harpal came along to a meeting with me, and we there met Iris and Godfrey. Iris, slowly, I had met as a student when we lived in the same student residence, so we greeted each other as old friends. And from that moment, Iris Godfrey, Harpal and I, and soon after Ella, joined together to form the Association of Communist Workers. And our first job at that stage, because it was where and how we'd met, was to be involved in the women's movement. And that, I think, was also foundational for our future work. The importance of the contribution of women, the fact that we, as very young and inexperienced, all of us really, members of the communist movement, had then to study, learn, and be able to put forward our views to the women's movement, to the meetings of the national meetings of women in the movement, representing many, many different strands and beliefs. And we, as women comrades, had to take that responsibility. We did the writing, we got up and spoke, which I think otherwise might never have happened. If you look at many of the existing communist organisations at that time, they'd taken so much of their ideas from the trade union movement meetings in pubs, very unfriendly to women, and quite a lot of misogyny. And I think that was also a transformational coincidence of events and people. That was the crucible from which we first emerged as the Association of Communist Workers. We went on to support Zimbabwe, the liberation movement in Zimbabwe. And then later on, the next stage was when Harpal became involved in the Indian Workers' Association and the Association of Indian Communists. And at that point, this is the supreme contradiction, I find, that our politics separated Harpal and I, but it also kept us together. So physically, it became impossible because at that stage, it was just at that time that I'd had both Joti and Ranjeet. Joys to both of us, but obviously children require looking after. And my view was that we should look after our children. We couldn't subcontract it because who else was going to teach them anything in relation to anything, any kind of philosophy that would be friendly to our worldview? And that I've regarded as a really important priority. But at the same time, at that precise moment, whereas previously then the meetings had all been taking place, or very often at our house, and the work was concentrated around where we were living, the work then moved away just at the moment that I was most rooted to the spot where my children were, where our children were. So the different demands at that stage meant it was much more difficult for us to actually work together in the movement. And I missed that very much because my comrades were my family. But equally, the ties of our politics have proved indissoluble. So together or apart, we have always been comrades in arms, working together, even when I wasn't in the front line and appeared to have disappeared. That was a strong tie. And that, I think, is what we have to... That is the legacy that others have spoken of. The life's work. We realised back in the 60s, when there was an effort to create a Marxist anti-revisionist party, the Communist Party of Britain, Marxist, I think it was called at that stage, wasn't it? With the Reg Birch Company. You couldn't do this just by the sheer wish to do it. Desire is not enough. There has to be a firm foundation. And the firm foundation, in effect, was supplied by Harpal over all those years of study, participating in the movement, analysing the various strands of the movement, analysing what was happening in this country and abroad, economically, politically. All of that breadth of analysis and understanding has proved to be the basis for the party now. And that's the basis we must not underestimate, we must not forget, we must not move away from it. We must carry on with study and understanding and analysis. That is what we can offer to the working class. That is what the working class in this country needs, is an understanding of why what is happening is happening. And as Marx said, as said of Marxism, Marxism is the first philosophy that doesn't just explain the world, it shows you how to change it. And that's the other half of what we have to bring to the working class. Understanding and the method of getting rid of it. So that is why we have to cherish Harpal's legacy as being the party above all things, and our work and our task, which remains after 60 years. It is still our task. We are much further along the road. Who knows? Lenin thought the revolution would never come in his lifetime. I'm sure it won't come in mine. It may well come in yours. But it's only possible if we have the vanguard party of the new type. I think that's what we have, and we must cherish it. And in so doing, we are doing the most profound thing we can do in the way of thanks to Harpal for his work and his life. Thank you.